My father was a Holocaust survivor, having escaped from the Panari death camp. After the war, he was dumped on a cargo boat and dropped in the Bronx, New York, without a penny to his name. No English, no family, only the scars of the Holocaust tortures. Yet he was always a well-adjusted man. What was his healer? I believe it was his staying busy, being as productive as possible. That felt good to him. It made him proud to be able to provide for my mom, my sister, and me. The punchline is that he is not a mere anecdote. As I was growing up, I got to know about 30 Holocaust survivors, and it was the ones who focused on work that seemed the most emotionally healthy, not to mention, of course, productive. I believe my father and some of those Holocaust survivors simply had drive by nature. Alas, many people don't seem to be able to. As Nike says, just do it. Many people need to do more than that. After all, just say no to drugs didn't exactly stop drug abuse. I hope this lecture will help. I'm going to share the ideas that have been most helpful to the largest percentage of the 3,900 career and life coaching clients that I've had the privilege of working with now for 26 years. I'm going to present 14 ways to give yourself more drive. First, 9 strategies presented chronologically from before you even have a task that you have to tackle all the way through the point where you've got to get past the task's roadblocks. And then for those of you who find those strategies insufficient, I'm going to offer 5 more strategies, these for overcoming psychological and physiological blocks. You needn't use them all. Just try those that you predict are likely to help you. Okay, but first, a myth that I really have to dispel. Some people think you have to be self-confident before you can develop the willpower to act, to have drive. Well, for some people that may be true, but many more of my clients first acted, even though they didn't feel confident. In psychologist terms, they would call that their behavior change preceded their attitude change. And they're taking actions, usually low-risk actions, the proverbial baby steps, increase their confidence, which in turn made them more willing to take additional actions. So, whether you're confident or not, let's see if we can replace at least some of your procrastination with willpower, maybe even out-and-out drive. On second thought, maybe we should do that later. All right. First, the 9 core ways to replace your procrastination with motivation, with willpower, maybe even out-and-out drive. Number 1, embrace work. That strategy is useful even before you have a task before you. Well, there certainly are exceptions. Most successful people seek out work. They try to do as much as possible, while less successful people are more likely to do the least they can get away with. Successful people find productivity to be key to their feeling better about themselves, key to their improving their reputation, and of course, key to abetting their career. That's not easy to do in these tough times. The guy is David McCulloch. He's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer. He said in an interview I had with him recently, the most contented people work hard. They have drive. That's a quote. Now, beyond feeling better about themselves, successful people's productivity makes them, like my dad, more likely to feel good about providing for their family and contributing to society. Some even say, and this may be a little abstract, but ultimately the most important reason they seek to do a lot of work is because it feels cosmically right to contribute as much as possible during the time that they're given on this earth. Now, I'd imagine that some of you still may not be sure that it's worth prioritizing productivity over pleasure, but it may help to look back on your own life. How much has your lack of drive helped or hurt you? I mean, no doubt you've had more time to play. That is a benefit. But if you're being fair-minded with yourself, has your work avoidance been a net plus? And looking forward, what benefits and liabilities would likely accrue from your replacing some of your procrastination with some willpower, with some drive? Picture those benefits. Picture, for example, yourself being secure in your job. Picture the thing you'd most love to buy. Picture your partner praising you instead of nagging you. Would making yourself have more drive be a net plus? And if that's too abstract to think about, overall, you don't want to think about it overall, it's too much. Think about the next task that you're likely to procrastinate. How would your life be better and worse if you just got it done? Started early so you had time to do the job right. Now, of course, I have to admit, some people are, of course, going to want to be more productive than others. We sometimes dub them, unfairly in my view, with a pathologizing term, workaholic, like a disease, like alcoholic. I would rather call them people who prioritize productivity over pleasure. Rather heroic, if you ask me. Nevertheless, this is not an exhortation to work nonstop. It's an invitation to self-reflect, to ask yourself, if I were to die tomorrow or next year, would I feel like I contributed enough? Was I productive enough? One way to stay conscious of that is to evaluate activities that you're about to do on what I call the meter. The meter goes from -10 to +10, where -10 is making things much worse, like selling cocaine to kids, to, on the other end of the continuum, +10, trying to cure cancer. So, for example, let's say on a Saturday morning you're deciding whether to watch TV, which would be kind of a 0 in the middle, doesn't hurt, doesn't help anybody, or finish that work project, which let's say is a +2. Now, of course, you might decide you need the recreation, and that's fine. But by making such decisions more consciously, by being aware of what I call that moment of truth when you're deciding what to do next, if you're like most of my clients, you're going to choose to be productive somewhat more often, at least. You'll have more drive. So that's number one, kind of embrace work. Two, not kind of, embrace work. Number two, again, each of these are tools like out of a smorgasbord that I'm hoping you'll pick one or more out of to help you develop more motivation, more drive, replace some of that procrastination with motivation. Number two is find inspiration. Now, obviously, you're more motivated when you're inspired. What are some sources of inspiration? Well, certainly an exciting goal is one. Goethe said, "Dream no small dreams, for they have no power to move the hearts of people." Another source of inspiration, proving someone wrong when they say you can't, or even worse, that you're a loser. Or the opposite. Sometimes what's going to inspire you are people who champion you, cheer you on. What if you don't have a cheerleader? Well, I do recommend that you make finding a cheerleader a goal of yours. But in the meantime, might you find inspiration in a famous person? For example, I'm inspired from having listened to the Great Courses course on Churchill. Churchill was terrible in school. His father hated him. He suffered a horrible defeat in World War I's Gallipoli campaign where 140,000 Allied troops under his command were killed or injured. And also, despite him being key to winning World War II, afterwards he lost a prime minister. And yet, despite all those failures, Churchill remains one of the most influential and respected people of the 20th century. He provides me with inspiration. Number three in my toolkit that I'm offering you of ways to increase your motivation, willpower, do it the fun way. Now, some people get less motivated, or what I call demotivate, because their perfectionism makes tasks so odious that they avoid the task altogether. Or they tackle tasks in the so-called best way, which is way out of sync with their strengths and their preferences. For example, if they have to write a report, they stare at a blank screen until some brilliant idea, indeed the entire plan, makes itself clear. Then he or she writes it the, quote, best way to avoid any possible criticism. They write it with long, filled in, very long length, filled in with tables and citations. The result is that the person is more likely to procrastinate the whole project until right before the deadline, when ironically, there's time only to do a slipshod job. The perfect can be the enemy of the good. If instead that person said, how can I do this the fun way? And thus made it shorter, based more on interviewing a few experts and presented attractively, it might not have been as rigorous as if she had done that all hard slog work, but it would likely have been better than a last-minute cramming job. And who knows? Maybe making it short, attractive, and based on expert interviews might make it more useful than if it were a tome. Number four, accept that not everything need be pleasant. That may seem to violate the previous strategy, do it the fun way. But one size does not fit all. For the particular task you're facing, select the strategy that's more likely to work for you in that situation. Actually, that term that accept that tip that accept not everything has to be pleasant. It's kind of a corollary of that first strategy, embrace work. When you accept that work is core to your value on this earth, you're more likely to accept that some work, even well-suited work, can sometimes be unpleasant. For example, while I enjoy presenting this lecture to you, I can't say that preparing for it was always pleasurable, let alone as pleasant as many fun things I could have done, like from playing with my dog Einstein, to hanging out with my wife, to listening to a great courses course. But as I mentioned earlier, for most of my successful clients, and frankly for me, working hard isn't a choice. We don't even think about it. Pleasant or not, we simply work a lot before we play. It's something we intrinsically know is the right thing to do. Maybe, just maybe, this mantra is going to help. It needn't be fun. It just must get done. Tip number 5, use your fear of embarrassment. Many of us will go to great lengths to avoid being embarrassed. So when you have a major project that you're at risk of not following through to completion, consider telling one or more people your goal and your deadline. You may gain willpower from your desire to avoid the embarrassment of telling them you didn't do it. One approach to becoming accountable to someone is to ask a person to check in with you every day. That, by the way, is why, one of the reasons at least, why 12-step programs and Weight Watchers often works. There's a website called stickit.com, STICKKIT.com. Offers an online approach to making yourself accountable. You state your goal and you target weekly milestones, for example, on a work project, landing a job, losing weight, cleaning out the basement, whatever. If you don't meet your weekly goal, the amount of money you specify in advance gets sent to a charity you dislike. So, for example, if you're a Republican, it would go to the Clinton Library. Well, to boost your motivation further, stickit.com allows you to select people who verify that you met your milestones. Pretty potent. Tip number 6, break it down into baby steps. Now, that advice, of course, has become a cliche. It was even a core joke in that hit movie, What About Bob?, in which the psychiatrist's main advice to Bob was always take baby steps. So we see Bob, for example, in the elevator saying, baby step onto the elevator, baby step into the elevator, I'm in the elevator, doors closed. Cliche or not, sometimes an advice becomes a cliche because it's so often useful. Breaking a task down into baby steps is often key to not feeling overwhelmed by it. Well, I can do that little step, you think. So it's like if I'm at the base of a steep hill and I look up and I probably say, ugh, that's overwhelming. But if I'll use the Buddhist term, stay in the moment, and I simply put one foot in front of the other, I'm more likely to build momentum and keep going. You ever climbed a mountain or at least a hill and then looked back and thought, wow, I didn't realize how far I'd climbed? Well, my wife, when she had to do her doctoral dissertation, she was intimidated by the task's enormity. One thing that helped her get it done was something we called the thermometer. You know, when a church or a nonprofit's trying to raise money, it often posts a sign in front with a thermometer. And every time a milestone is reached, more of the thermometer's tube is filled in with red. Well, my wife and I taped to the refrigerator a piece of paper with a crude thermometer I drew on it, with all the little dissertation milestones listed on the side. And every time Barbara met a milestone, we colored in that part of the thermometer in purple, and I gave her a kiss. So when you're facing a big project, you might try breaking it down into baby steps, maybe even using the thermometer technique. But what if you don't know how to break your task into the right baby steps? That's the time to ask for help. Not only will that get you the needed guidance, you're going to feel accountable to the person, which may make you more likely to get the task done and done well. Number 7, give yourself a reward. Here's another oldie but a goodie. Every time you're faced with a task you're at risk of procrastinating, promise yourself a reward on completing a milestone. It doesn't have to be food or something. Or you might, if you do that, you might find yourself with the tasks done, but an extra 10 pounds around your middle. Instead, ask yourself what will motivate you. A 3-minute walk around the block, 15 minutes of chatting on the phone. All right, you can have a little ice cream. Number 8, start with short stints. A client of mine is a stage actress. She had a major audition, and she was overwhelmed by how much she had to do to improve her audition monologue, and so she procrastinated. I asked her to spend just 30 minutes a day for each of the 10 days till the audition. Now, I'd be dishonest with you to tell you she started with 30 and then, having gotten into it, increased it to 2 hours. But she did put in that 30 minutes a day most days, felt great about the audition, and is waiting to hear if she got a call back. Tip number 9. I don't know, this may run out in 9 seconds here, so I'm going to wait until we get to 59 and see if it goes past this thing. I'm not sure.